Cain, Balaam, and Korah, examples of apostates. Verse 11. Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain, and ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah. Jude, verse 11. Jude has already given three examples of apostate groups: the children of Israel, the angels who rebelled in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now we are given another three by way of illustration, and these three are individuals. Woe unto them. The word woe is the Greek word oi. Oi. And the very pronunciation of this word is a wailing. Oi, oi. That's my daughter's favorite word. It denotes a wail of grief or of denunciation. Here it is more a wailing of denunciation, but it is both of these apostates who Jude has just identified. He says, woe unto them, for they have gone the way of Cain. Cain was a religious man, but a natural man. He believed in God and believed in religion, but he did it after his own will. He denied that he was a sinner, rejected redemption by blood, and thought that he could come his own way to God. Excuse me. Hebrews chapter 11 and verse 4 certainly tells the story. By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous. God testified of his gifts, and by it he, being dead, yet speaketh. Cain is dead also, yet he speaketh. The way of Cain is the way of man, who refuses to bring the little lamb which pointed to Christ. In other words, Cain did not come to God by faith. He did not believe God when he said that man was to bring a little lamb for a sacrifice, that without shedding of blood there was no forgiveness of sins, and that penalty must be paid. Excuse me. Cain thought, I'm not going to make it without something. So let me get something. Excuse me for a minute. We're coming up on the 3-hour mark. About as long as I can talk without something in my mouth, it seems these days. It used to be worse than that. I used to have something in my mouth all the time. But, we're not coming up on the 3-hour mark. It's only 2 hours and 40 minutes. But I have noticed it cracking more recently. Okay. Let's try this again. Cain thought that he could come to God his own way. And that is a picture of the apostate today. The apostate calls himself a liberal and a modernist. But my friend, this is as old as the Garden of Eden. Right outside of the Garden of Eden, Cain was a modernist and a liberal. He believed in religion and God, but he did it his own way, not God's way, and ran greedily after the errors of Balaam for reward. Here we have the error of Balaam. in 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 15, it is the way of Balaam. And in Revelation chapter 2 and verse 14, it is the doctrine of Balaam. In 2 Peter, we see that the thing that was the undermining of the man, that is, Balaam, was guilty of covetousness, which is idolatry. He was a hired preacher. He wanted to make a buck with the gift he had, a gift that was apparently God given. This was the way of Balaam, and it was his undoing. A man can seek for something other than money, however. He can seek for prominence, for popularity, for fame, for applause, or for a position. You know, I was thinking about that. That's why we have people who want to, the musicians who want to sing in our churches, because they are afforded an opportunity to sing, not because they want to know anything about God. They want to just perform. There are many different, and that's the same thing about the preacher. He wants the place to preach, and as long as they give him a place to preach, he'll preach whatever they want to hear. There are many things which would put a man in the way of Balaam. Jude says that this mark is apostate. In the book of Revelations, you have the doctrine of Balaam, Numbers 22 through chapter 25, tells us that this man could not bring a curse against the nation of Israel. And so he told Balak that by sending the Moabite women into the camp of Israel, he would be able to bring fornication and adultery into the homes through mixed marriages. You can be sure of one thing: from Genesis to Revelations, God warns against the intermarriage of believers and unbelievers. You cannot condone such marriages on any basis whatsoever. It is unfortunate that too many young people are not warned of this, because of it has resulted in a great deal of unhappiness. The error of Balaam here in Jude is that he thought God would have to punish Israel for their sins. He did not recognize that there is a morality that is above natural morality. He thought that a righteous God had to curse Israel. He was truly unaware of the morality of the cross. It is taught in the Old Testament that God can maintain and does force his authority, but he can be just and the justifier of a believing sinner. Balaam did not understand that God would forgive the nation Israel when they turned to him. It is sometimes difficult for someone to understand how a man can be converted. When I worked in a bank, that is McGee and not me, I wish I'd taken up that offer, but I didn't. Maybe it was a good thing I didn't. Was led to Christ and wanted to study for the ministry. My fellow workers, most of whom were church members, would not understand how I could study for the ministry, and they had some reason to wonder about that. But by the way, they couldn't understand that God had forgiven me and that I had a new life now. They just didn't believe that. They didn't believe it because they couldn't understand it. This is the same problem that Balaam had, and uh, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah, which is Korah. Uh, you will perhaps recall that Korah led a rebellion against Moses. See Numbers chapter 16. I remember brother Charlie brought a message about Korah. He was directing the message to against Ernie Kidd, the chief deacon that had come against him that I talk about, that was basically the hungry for power. And so this is an example of apostate. He came to the conclusion that Moses was not the only one around who had access to God. Korah rebelled against God constituted authority, who was Moses. He wanted to intrude into that which was sacred. In effect, he asked, has God only spoken to Moses? Who does Moses think he is? Actually, Moses didn't think too much of himself or that he had any undue qualifications. In fact, Moses wanted to disqualify himself as a leader of the people of Egypt. And remember, he said, not me, I can't talk. Why are you calling me? God sequestered him instead of it being his idea. That's how you identify a true man of God. He doesn't want to be up there speaking. He doesn't want the attention. He doesn't want to be on a podcast spending 5 hours talking at one time. He wants to be doing something else. But God sequesters him and he's obedient to God, so he does what God tells him to do. That's how you tell a true man of God from apostate, was one of the ways I would. But God had called Moses, and this man Korah rebelled against him. He contradicted the authority of Moses. He intruded into the office of the priest, and he died. In other words, he was a rebellious man, rebelled against God. Jude says that such rebellion characterizes the apostate. Notice that the things which are true of these three individuals from the Old Testament are also the things which are true of apostates. Cain did not believe that you need to come to God by faith and that you need a bloody sacrifice because man is a sinner. He believed that if you have a religion, that is all you need, whether it's worshiping the environment, Mother Earth, or it's worshiping abortion or transgender, or whether it's worshiping, you've got, as long as you have a religion, you're going to heaven, thanks to Oprah and who was the Mormon guy that was on Fox News. But anyway, the apostates goes along with that. The error of Balaam is to think that the holy God must punish sin and that sin cannot be forgiven. The apostate makes the same mistake. He says, how in the world can the sacrifice of Christ save anyone? A man has to do this for himself, and the apostate rebels against God as Korah did. They assume an authority that is not theirs. They stand in the pulpit and give out politics instead of giving out the word of God, instead of telling what God says. They tell people what they say and what they think, like the lady apostate at the inauguration of Trump, where she told him that she rebuked him for his stance on homosexuality and transgenders. Her herself was an apostate. She was a false preacher. She said, anyway, maybe she's going to die like Korah. A man said to me some time ago, she was paid $10 million to do so, by the way. Another example, the way you can tell is the money, follow the money. I have dropped out of my church. I am tired of listening to a preacher who gives political economics and attempts to stand in the position of being the authority on government. He assumes that he has all knowledge and he has never used the Word of God. He never tells what God says or what God thinks, and I'm tired of listening to him. I know something about that man's church, but I assume that the preacher is an apostate because he has the mark of the apostate. These three men from the Old Testament illustrate this to us today. And that concludes that section. Now we're going to move on to the next section, which is section